Well, good evening. My name is Roy Conover. I'm one of the pastors here. I'm part of the support and recovery team, and welcome to online. Here we are supporting each other, and I'm excited to be here with you tonight. Now tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down steps 1 through 3, but I want to say a word here before I get started. For those of you who are part of the recovery program normally at LifePoint, welcome. If you happen to be brand new and you've done your own recovery work and you're joining us, great. I do want to make it clear that as we go through this material, the work that we do here through LifePoint Church, our material is rooted in God's Word, and we name Jesus Christ as our higher power. But if you don't, you are welcome. We are so glad that you have joined us. So, what we all have in common here is that we all have a level of pain. We all have hurts, habits, and hang-ups that we are grappling with in our life. And if that's you, then you are welcome to join us. You don't have to have God talk or any of that to be a part of working through your hurts, habits, and hang-ups. And so as we're talking about that, and as we're looking at step 1 specifically, we're talking about our need to admit something. If you look at step 1, it says, we admitted that we were powerless over our sin, that our lives have become unmanageable. So when we're talking about these specific hurts, habits, and hang-ups, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about drugs, we're talking about alcohol, we're talking about pornography, we're talking about gambling, we're talking about overeating, we're talking about anger. The list goes on and on. Maybe you're a people pleaser. Maybe you really struggle at being a victim. Maybe you struggle with depression or anxiety. Any of these things are issues that we can struggle with. And if that's you, welcome. We're glad that you are with us tonight. Now, as we're talking about step 1, that we were powerless over our sin, a central theme to this is that we're struggling with control. We would like to think we have control, but there are actually some hindrances to us maintaining some semblance of normalcy in our life. Some of the hindrances is that we can't actually see the problem. Everyone else around us is telling us about it, but we don't see it. And so we're busy blaming everything and everyone else in our lives for what's going on. Maybe you've had that experience. So what we want to do is, of course, stop minimizing and justifying and rationalizing, and that's the essence of the problem. And what we struggle with in step 1 is just taking that first step to admit, I have a problem. This really is an issue in my life. Because at the center of this problem that we have, whatever it is for you, it's getting to a place of saying, I actually have a problem. Now, if that's you, then I want to encourage you to start facing the fact that maybe control is a bigger issue in your life than you've been willing to admit. So what is it that we're trying to control? Well, the symptom is just the drinking, the drugs, the gambling, whatever that might be. Those are just the symptoms. But what am I trying to control? A lot of times what I'm trying to control is my image. I'm trying to control what you think of me. I want you to say or do something specific that makes me feel better. And so I'm trying to control. Or maybe I'm trying to control people directly. I want them to say and do the things I want them to say and do, even what they feel about me. And so I invest a whole bunch of energy in trying to make that happen. But we can even try and control God. Whether you name God as Jesus Christ or He is your higher power, whatever that is, we can still try and control Him. And think maybe if we just do all the right stuff, say all the right stuff, that then maybe things will work out in my life. But what you see as a result of control in your life is maybe some of these behaviors that you can relate to. Maybe as a result of control or other people trying to control you, maybe you go to a place of withdrawal. I'm just going to pull away from everybody else. Or maybe you go to that place of giving advice, right? That's great because then I don't have to worry about what's happening in my life. I can just tell you how to fix yours, right? Or maybe it's about you taking care of people. Maybe you do that through anger, and that's how you keep people in check in your life. Or maybe you try to control by being helpless, right? So people will help you. And we can adopt a victim mindset when we go into that place. Or maybe you control by trying to manipulate and getting people to do what you want. But here are some of the effects of control. Maybe you have felt some of this. People don't like to be controlled, but here's how it leaves us feeling. Maybe it leaves you feeling lonely. Maybe it leaves you feeling afraid. Maybe you feel enslaved to the behavior, like you just can't stop it. Or maybe it makes you feel numb. What I most often hear people say is it leaves them feeling exhausted. So the question is, how long are you going to keep running on that hamster wheel before something's going to give and you get to the place of saying, I admit I have a problem? Well, that's the first step, right? We just need to admit that we have a problem and that we're actually powerless to do anything about this problem. It leads us to step 2. The second thing we need to do is believe. Once we can actually admit we have a problem, do we actually believe we have a problem? So step 2 says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Because the reality is, when our life is out of control and we're struggling with our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, we act insane, right? And here's a definition of insanity. Perhaps you've heard it. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Have you been there? I know I have. I know I've struggled with this. And it is a hard place to be. It is like that hamster wheel. You just keep doing the same thing over and over again. But actually, we have to believe that we have a problem. That's why the admitting piece in step 1 is so important. Because unless you actually believe that you have a problem and believe that God or a higher power can help you overcome that problem, you're gonna stay stuck in this cycle. But there are actually 2 pieces that we see where it comes to this insanity and what keeps us stuck in this process. The first is that we have to realize that we need help, right? We need to get to a place where we recognize our need for help. And what I find with this step 2 and the insanity piece is, it's like banging your head against a wall, right? How much pain do I have to have before I recognize my need for help, whether it's from God or from another human being that I can reach out to and say, I've got a problem. Something is wrong here. But I think there are a couple of reasons that we don't ask for help. The first one is that we've tried before and people have just let us down. They haven't been there for us. We asked for help and then they didn't help us. And then the second reason is that when we've put it out there, we get really discouraged because somebody has let us down when they weren't there for us in the time that we needed them. So we use these as justifications and rationalizations as why I won't reach out and ask somebody else for help. But really the crux of step 2 and this idea of believing that a power, that God could restore us to sanity, is the object of your faith matters, right? Is God able to be able to help you overcome whatever that hurt, habit, or hang-up is that you might be struggling with? That's the power of the belief. My question for you as you grapple with step 2 is, how long will you keep trying to do this on your own? How long will you let the insanity continue? Because that's what step 2 is all about. But all you have to do is believe. It sounds simple, I know, but it's taking that step of being able to ask for help. And then there's the third step. I mean, once you can admit that you've got a problem and you believe that God could restore you to sanity, hey, I'm going to ask for help, I'm going to do something different, now comes decision time. Step 3 says, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Decide. You have to make a decision. And so I think there are 2 reasons we don't decide to trust God and let Him help us. The first one is we don't really understand our condition, right? It's not that bad. I can stop anytime I want. It's not a big deal. The problem is, and that feeds right into the insanity, right? You just keep doing the same thing over and over again and nothing changes because you're not asking for help and you're not coming to that place of admitting, yeah, I've really got a problem. Do you begin to see how all of these first 3 steps work together? They work in unison really well. So for you who don't think that you've got that big of a problem, Do you have to lose your marriage or your family first before you get to that place of saying, wow, I really do have a problem? Or maybe you have to go bankrupt because of gambling or mismanagement of your funds. Or maybe you have to have serious health issues to recognize that something is going wrong in your life and how you're trying to manage it. Because we'll use denial, we'll use blame, we'll use all kinds of rationale to excuse how bad the situation is in our life. But here's the second reason I think we often don't decide to turn our will over to God. And that second reason is we really don't understand God's character. We don't understand Him as someone who is loving and is actually wanting us to help us. Why? Well, I think oftentimes we superimpose a picture on God that's reflective of our parents, usually our mom and our dad. So with a dad, it might be that your experience with your dad was that they were abusive, that they were angry, that they were distant, that they were unavailable. And so we automatically put that filter on God and say, well, that must be what God was like. Or maybe if you had a mother who was passive or uncaring, and maybe she was abusive or controlling, we put that image on God. And so we can use these as reasons to not fully trust God. Because the truth is, when you read the Bible, and from a Christian perspective, God is loving. God is loving, and He's kind, and He's compassionate, and merciful, and gracious. And He wants to be there to help us. But if that's not been your experience, and it's been the opposite in growing up with people who were supposed to take care of you, man, that's really hard. So this is how steps 1, 2, and 3 work together. Admit that you're powerless. You've got a problem. And then you've got to believe that God really can, or a higher power, can help restore you to a place of sanity. But then at some point you've got to decide. And you're going to decide to do the next steps, 4 through 12. Because those are the action steps of carrying this out. So I've got some questions for you as you go to your group time. A couple of things I want you to discuss in your group. And that is, have you been able to identify, just in this brief time, maybe a hurt, habit, or hang-up that you've been trying to control? Second question is, can you identify what is holding you back from asking for help, either admitting, believing, or deciding? Where are you stuck? And then you've got a couple of next steps that I'd like you to consider for this week. Homework, if you will. So maybe try to identify how you're trying to control your image or others or even God. So maybe check those emotions, the loneliness, the fear, the anger, the numbness, or even the exhaustion. And then here's the second question. Do an inventory of what you feel like you have to lose if something doesn't change. And is there somebody that you can reach out to for help? Well, I'm praying God's best for you as you go to your group time and what God has to show you. Thanks for joining us tonight.